Under ISO 27001, 5.30, Annex A Control ICT Readiness for Business Continuity, it talks about how your organization needs to be ready for a business continuity situation. It talks about how you need a plan. It talks about how that needs to be maintained and it needs to be tested. But business continuity is a big topic. It's worth remembering, if you didn't know, that business continuity has a standard all of its own, ISO27001. So there's a lot to it. But when you're putting this together for ISO 27001, it's important to think about a number of aspects. And I want to cover that here in this video because all too often I see people approaching business continuity either in a very haphazard way or in a way which, being quite frank, takes us back 20 years. It's important to always remember that, yes, you're writing these plans to satisfy requirements of the standard, but more importantly, they are meant to be read when things have gone wrong. So you need to think about the reader, the state of the mind of the reader when they are going through a stressful situation. This is one of the reasons why, when you think about business continuity, you need to think about them in three ways. First of all, incident management plans, how you actually respond to the incident. Business contingency plans, that is, what are your contingency processes? This is the document that will deal with your ability to move people or systems, etc., to a contingency, a backup plan. And then finally, disaster recovery plans. And DR plans are more detailed and will deal with the actual recovery of critical systems and infrastructure. So there are three components to business continuity, all contained under this one control 5.30 in ISO 27001. So keep that in mind. Incident response plans, business continuity plans, and disaster recovery plans. We'll deal with the first one, incident response plans. First of all, your incident response plans are going to be read by people who are going to quite literally respond to an incident. Therefore, they cannot and must not be long-winded and wordy documents. Go and take a look at your own business continuity plan or incident response plan that you have. Does it have an introduction? Does it have a purpose? Does it have a last reviewed date? Does it have a scope of the business continuity capability? Does it have a this plan was last tested and this was the outcome of those tests structure to it? If it does, then you've just wasted round about 5 or 6 pages of complete rubbish. No one needs to see that. Not in a crisis situation, not when an incident has occurred. What you actually want is your plan to have maybe a cover page that has, yes, the revision and the version date on there, but your second page, the most important page that you have, is key contacts, people to speak to, how to invoke this plan. Done. Doesn't need to be more complex than that in the first page or two. You see, when bad things happen, people will go into fight or flight mode. It's important to, again, remember there's a whole psychology around how people respond to crisis situations. And although, yes, we're not in a, thankfully, most of us are not in a war zone and dealing with life or death situations, our evolutionary makeup doesn't differentiate from the risk of a saber-toothed tiger or a horde of marauding villagers coming over the hill to attack us, to a server that's gone down or a negative news story that's just about to be to break. So our chemical imbalance in our minds, our amygdala will instantly kick in and be hijacked. Our thought processes will be hampered significantly in a crisis situation. If you think I'm exaggerating on any of that, well, have you ever been in a stressful situation where you could feel your stomach just churn, your blood runs cold, your mind goes blank in those terrible fight or flight situations? Well, that's your body's reaction to stress. And yet, most of us have a business continuity plan or an incident response plan that just has a purpose and an objectives and a blah de blah. Waste of time. Please keep your incident response plans to a minimum. If you can get everything into 1 or 2 pages, then you've done an amazing job. My approach, business continuity plans, typically the actual contingency plans, so this is the second part, are typically no more than 7 or 8 pages long, and it doesn't matter how big the organization is. The incident response plan, the first part of it, typically no more than 3-4 pages in length. And that incident response plan is meant to be read by the incident responders. Do they know who they are in your organization? Do you know who they are? You have to identify those critical people that you will bring into a room if there was a significant event. And the incident responders that you have aren't just the technical team. It's not just IT. And I know there's a real desire sometimes for organizations just to purely focus on network outages and ransomware attacks and cyber attacks, etc. But even in those situations, there is still a people aspect. Our IT team are still people. So when you do have a network outage and such, what are the people aspects that need to be considered? What are the facilities that maybe they require? What about the press or the media coverage that might need to be included? So your incident response plan needs to be well-rounded. That means you need to include people from your people team, from your finance team, from your operational team. Yes, of course, from the technical team, and yes, indeed, from facilities as well. Because they will all, at some point, if it's a significant event, will have some input or something that they can provide insight into. So your incident response plan needs to be very directional. It needs to have core information, key information in there, such as critical sites, critical infrastructure details, and this can be just literally bulleted points. Our critical systems are our key locations in order of priority are and you put those in. And if you think this is tough, run a business continuity exercise with your senior leadership team. Get them into a room and present them with a scenario that says, we have just lost X location or we've lost X system, and ask them, well, what would we do? Who would we need in the room? And they will tell you instantly, well, we need Jeff from accounts, we need Diane from facilities, and we need Sarah from IT, and we need John from marketing. Great, these are your crisis management people. Put them into your plan, get their contact details. Which systems do we need up and running first? Well, we better get the CRM up and running first. Great, that's number 1. Number 2, we better get the accounting system up and running. Right, okay, that's number 2. Number 3, and you move through your systems. It's that easy to actually pull this together. It needs work, it needs coordinating, you need to run these workshops, but this is how you build your incident response plan. Your business continuity plans equally have to be written in a similar vein. You need to think brevity. You can't have a business continuity plan that has a page for this is what we do if there's a fire. And then the next page is this is what we do if there's a flood. And then the next page, this is what we do if there's a pandemic. And then the next page, and this is what we do if there's a thunderstorm. And then the next page, and you get what I mean. I remember working for an organization once. I walked in and I asked them, show me your business continuity plan. What do you have? And they very proudly presented me with a plan that was about 100 pages deep. And they actually said, we've got 82 scenarios that we have identified as potential issues. And we have a contingency process for each of those situations. 82. Now, I don't know about you, but when bad thing happens, I'm not going to go sifting through 82 pages to find out what I have to do. So here's a trick, here's a tip to help you simplify your business continuity plans. And this is very simply that your plans really only need to cater for one of several things. It's either the complete or partial loss of people, premises, processes, PCs, or providers. It's 5 things. Because in truth, business continuity is about the impact it has, not the cause. The cause comes later. We look at the root cause analysis and we do the post-incident review after everything is returned to normal, the disaster recovery phase. But what you need to do right here, right now, is respond to what has happened. So let me take one of those apart, because some people don't believe it can be that simple. Well, let me just explain it is. So let's say, for instance, you have had a fire. The building you work in, your normal day-to-day operations has suffered a cataclysmic fire. Okay. It's denial of access to site, right? Loss of building, loss of premises. That's how you deal with it. Let's think of it another way. Let's say there's been a flood. Let's say that we're in the United Kingdom and we have a lot of floods. We have a lot of water. We have a lot of panic about the weather, and you can't get to the site because the area is flooded. It's unsafe to get there. Denial of access to site, right? You've lost the site. You can't physically get there. So it's still the same scenario. You're still dealing with it as much as you would have dealt with it if there was a fire. Again, to illustrate the point here, I worked with an organization, helped them put business continuity and incident response plans in place. And I heard from them several months after I'd worked with them. They came back to me and said, just wanted to thank you for the work that you did for us. The incident response plans, we had to invoke them this weekend. And I said, well, what actually happened? What calamity impacted your location? And they said, we never foresaw this, but we actually had protesters. They came and sat outside our offices, denied our staff access to the building. They couldn't gain access because of these protesters. Now, the punchline, the funny aspect of this is that the protesters have got their address wrong, because this kind of client, there was no real risk to them of ever having protesters outside their building. But they dealt with it as an incident, as a true incident, as a business continuity issue. So complete or partial loss of building. We talked about what might happen if the front of the building was impacted by an issue and that no one could gain access to the building or their offices from the front of the building. We talked about how they could gain access to the back of the building, how we would communicate that message. And on this occasion, that's exactly what they had to do. For several hours, the protesters sat there until they were told that they'd actually got the wrong address, and everything ended peacefully and successfully. But that would have never made its way into a business continuity plan if we'd ever said, well, let's have a plan for in case this building is ever impacted by protesters, because that would have never occurred to this particular client. Because it wouldn't. It wasn't part of their risk, wasn't part of their risk profile. But it was still dealt with as an incident response and a business continuity process, because we simply had a plan that dealt with the complete or partial loss of people, premises, processes, PCs, or providers. So your plans need to be structured in the same way. Now, When you are thinking about those scenarios, I would urge you to sit down with your teams and walk through not the scenarios that would cause the impact, but what would you do if you suddenly lost access to your building. Now we're into a different kind of conversation, because had I asked you to think about all the possible things that could cause your building not to be accessed, that's a whole different brainstorm and session and conversation, because then you're getting people saying, well, that'll never happen. How would that ever happen? You know, we're never going to have protesters, so why are we having a plan for that? Or we're never going to have a fire because we've got all these fire suppressant technologies in place and controls. Put that to one side and just simply say, right, okay, guys, we can't gain access to our office. What do we do? What's the order of priority? And the final thing I want to say to you when you're putting all this together is, remember, from an ISO 27001 perspective, it's about maintaining information security, because whatever contingency processes you put in place must have commensurate security controls. So your contingency for loss of access to your office cannot simply be, well, we'll go down to the Costa and coffee shop down the road, and other coffee stores are available, and we'll go and set up and use the free Wi-Fi, because that's not really a secure contingency process. So you need to think about that as well. And the final thing I want to say to you, and it's a challenge, and this is what I do for all the plans. Remember what I said earlier when I said that when during stressful situations, our amygdala is hijacked, our thinking brain sort of takes a step back and we react rather than respond. Well, studies have shown that our reading capability drops through the floor. I don't think that's the exact statistic they use, but I'm going to use that, which basically means that your ability to read is actually hampered in a crisis situation. That's why in emergency situations, they don't have wordy signs saying, please follow the attendant in the event of an evacuation, please do the following. It just simply says, get out, stay safe. It tells you very pointedly, staccato type of way, do this, do that, get out. That's kind of how you've got to put your plans together, which is why you shouldn't have any bump in there about the purpose of this plan is to help our organization because we really care about your da-da-da-da-da. If you want to do that, that's great. Put it in a separate document. Put that in your business continuity strategy. But your incident response plan needs to be brief. And this is the challenge I'm going to give you. Whenever I write a incident response plan, each line within it can have no more than 7 words. Think about that for a minute. The instructions that we give are no more than 7 words, and often no more than 5. So I'll give you an example of what the kind of things that we would write in a business continuity plan from an instructions perspective. So in the event of a ransomware, disconnect from the network. Do not switch off the PC. Speak to IT support. Identify the variant. Establish extent of damage. And that's how it goes on. It goes on in that detail, in that level of just do this, do this. It's directional. There's no ambiguity. It's short, sharp, and precise. There you are. So, incident response, business continuity. Disaster recovery, we will cover in a separate video because that is something that goes into a lot more detail. But until then, thank you for your attention, and I look forward to seeing you on the next video. Stay well, stay safe, stay connected. Bye.